If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Today's guest is Jaymie Loy. Jaymie's someone who started with horses. We'll talk about that a bit later on in the interview, but she's now teaching horse handling and reproduction. How are you, Jaymie?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Jaymie, favourite quote to start us off with. What have you got?
Yes, well, not a quote as such, but a verse from a poem in my grandfather's book.
Yep.
It says, "The outside world will never know what it's like to love a horse or know the bond that grows between a rider and their horse. They work away together through the wind and dust and rain. Success is never easy. It depends how hard you train."
I've got shivers down my spine now. That was lovely. I've heard it before, but I think it really does hit home with horse people. But yeah,
it shows that you work hard for what you want, regardless of whether others understand why you want it or why you're working towards it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think the classic one is you say you're going to have a lesson, and people who don't understand horses say, "Why are you having a lesson? Can't you already ride?"
Yes, exactly.
Just sort of putting that extra bit in.
It's always about working on ourselves. Yep.
Yes. All right, now you talked about your grandfather. So tell us a little bit about how you started with horses, not just how you started, but what your first memories are.
Well, both my late grandparents, they owned and operated a riding school in Deniliquin for about 40 years, and that's how I got into horses. Since I was born, I was always at the riding school, had a great relationship with my grandmother in particular. But I used to go on rides with them all the time. And I remember my earliest memories of being a stubborn little child and making my grandmother take me on every ride, every day, sitting on the pommel of her saddle. And the next day I couldn't walk. And then I would scream and moan about how I was so sore and that they shouldn't have let me do it. And then the next day I would just do the same thing. So at the time, it was amazing. I'm sure the next day I was regretting it, but it's just something I'll always remember.
Yeah. And is that your first memory of riding in front of your grandmother's horse, or do you remember?
Yeah.
So you were always at the riding school anyway, that, you never really had that first time.
Yeah. It wasn't what you could say a classical riding school, or it was more of a trail riding school. They taught you all of the really good basics of it, but they just had fun. My grandmother, and my grandfather, they taught lessons 365 days a year. They never, even on Christmas, it was kids' dream to be able, as their Christmas present, to go for a ride at Mary's, and she did that. Christmas was her busiest day every year.
Wow, that's great.
And I got to be a part of all of that, so that was really good.
Now, being that kid that wanted to sit on the pommel of a grandmother's horse, did you always think that you were going to have a career with horses or do something with horses? They would have been good role models for you. Did you think that you were going to take over their school, or how did it work out? What was your thought process there?
Well, certainly when I was little, that was definitely my dream, to take over the riding school. And I suppose working in the horse industry with a background like that is kind of inevitable. But we then moved over to Indonesia when I was young, or in my early teens, and we lived over there and had no horse contact at all. And then we came back and moved to the Hunter Valley, which is sort of horse hub central. And that's when I really understood that that's what I wanted to do, was to work in the horse industry. And at that time, it was primarily because I worked on studs, horse studs.
Yep.
And I thought that was my future, stud reproduction.
Yep.
In particular, because I loved foal watching.
Yeah. If someone's going to work in the horse industry, what do you think are the core skills or character traits? Something they need even before they start?
Yeah, I think you need enthusiasm and commitment, and they kind of go hand in hand. You could be completely committed and unenthusiastic, and you're just not going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve because it becomes a chore. Or you can be completely enthusiastic and not committed, and you're still not going to achieve the goals because, again, it becomes a bit of a chore because you don't have that commitment and drive to do it. So, they would certainly be my two.
Yep. But once you are working in the horse industry, what's the best thing?
When you're working in the industry, I feel it is good to try and learn something new every day. The industry is changing so much in these recent years, and it's really good to be able to learn and develop with all of the new information that's coming out. So I think you have to work hard and try and learn something new.
What's some of the lessons that you've learned just this year or within the last year?
I guess on a sort of personal level, you learn how relaxed you can become around your own horses. And I teach safe horse handling every single day. And every single day I realise, well, if I actually looked at what I did with my own horses, I would be considered too comfortable around them. So that's something that, is particularly in the last few years when I've been teaching horse handling to both experienced and inexperienced handlers, the habits we form.
Yeah. I'm thinking of experienced people because you do get very at home with your own horses. There's a lot of trust there. You trust the horse trusts you. But then, if you're working with mares that may not be used to a lot of handling, and particularly if you're working with foals, because you work with foals or not? You do the horse handling?
Mares and foals and stallions,
Yeah. So there is a lot to be learned.
Yes, definitely. And I find we sometimes just forget about things that horses, like a horse can't see you if you're standing directly behind them, and you might forget that when you're pulling off a rug while standing behind the horse. Or one of my friends, she left a tail wrap on her horse and went to pull it off in the paddock and got kicked in the head.
Yep.
And just things like that horse didn't do that out of malice. It just simply wasn't aware that she was behind it because it can't see. And just little day-to-day things that we do. And when you actually put it into perspective, it's good to look at things and change it.
Yeah, and I think they do a lot out of instinct, don't they?
Yes.
Their instinct is just to protect themselves. So if you don't educate them that you're actually there, then they're only reacting on instinct. Yeah.
Exactly.
Tell us about a person, and you've already talked about your grandparents who've influenced you and helped you with horses. Has there been anyone more recently than your grandparents? Because you said that you're away from horses. How long were you in Indonesia for?
About 4 years.
Yeah, and then came back. So since you've been back, who's influenced you and helped you in your career?
I find that most people here at the university have. I had a really great experience when I was a student here, and the teachers and people that are involved here are really great. And in particular, more recently, Hayley Randall has joined the team, and she's an absolute wealth of knowledge, and she has this way of finding things, like seeing things how other people might not see them. And that's really great to, again, have that perspective as well. Yep. But primarily my grandparents are certainly the people who inspired me the most, I guess.
Yeah, we've just interviewed Dr. Hayley Randall as well. 164 she was, if people want to go back and listen to that. Yeah. Okay, now that's good. What about horses? Because you're dealing with horses, but you're dealing with a lot of different horses, not one particular horse. Has there been a horse that you think's influenced you and helped you in your knowledge and your career, or do you think it's been all horses?
Well, I think one of the horses I remember is obviously the first horse I owned myself, and he was a research horse here at the university. And once the research trial was finished, I then purchased him, and the key characteristic about him is that he's standard bred. And it's just a standardbreds full stop amaze me, and this horse amazed me because they have one life where they get taught a certain way of doing things, and then you use them as a riding horse and you change everything that they have learnt to date. And sometimes it's messy, and sometimes you don't quite get it right, and the two of you have to work together to get the right signals. But they try so hard. They're doing something that's completely different to them. When they race, they're raced with full pressure put onto their mouths, and they're still expected to go at a decent pace until they're allowed to run right at the end. And we're training them that we don't want them to be pulling on the bit or, running towards that pressure. So I think, my standardbred, his name is Henry. And he was a teaching horse and a research horse here at the university. And I think he's changed my way of thinking when it comes to training horses and handling horses.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it is hard with horses to learn one thing and then learn another, and it takes longer. So I think, what you're doing with your teaching is you're teaching people that right from the start, if the horses are handled correctly, then it's going to be easier for them in later life. And they'll always get someone who appreciates that. Yeah.
Yes. Well.
Yeah. Well, it's the horses that don't get well handled and do misbehave and do have bad habits. They're the ones become challenges for people. And unless you've got a lot of experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's quite often we can get really frustrated with the horse, and realistically, it's only the horse doing what he's doing based on his previous experience and just a general lack of understanding of what you might be asking the horse to do.
Yes, yep. What do you think? You know, you talked about Henry and the work you've done with him with a lot of pride. What do you think is your proudest moment? Has it been with Henry, with the students that you're teaching, or anything in particular there?
Yeah, Henry's definitely up there with some of my proudest moments. He has been used in a few demonstrations at Equitana to show the versatility of life after racing for standardbreds. But I guess breeding my first foal was kind of my proudest moment, because I was able to inseminate the mare myself and foal down the mare, and she's now just over 1 year old, and she's growing up to be a really great horse. And I get to apply everything that I know from reproduction, which is one of my main fields, to safe horse handling, and I get to start with her right from the beginning of it all. And I think that's probably been my proudest moment. She is a cracker of a horse, though I'm a little bit biased.
What's her name?
Her name is Sassy.
Sassy, good name. Now, you're going to Equitana this year?
I do hope to, yes.
Yep.
But just CSU's having a stall on there, hopefully, for prospective students.
Cool. What do you think then, thinking about where you are now, what do you think your biggest challenge has been?
I think the biggest challenge, and when I'm thinking about it sort of more for horse handling, is that sometimes you're teaching people that have decades of experience. They have done it for 20, 30, 40 years. And I don't have decades of experience. I've been around horses for my whole life, but, we're talking 28 years in comparison to many other people. And so it's teaching them in a way that keeps them enthusiastic about the basics. We have to treat every handler as if they are a novice horse handler, and we're teaching them a certain way of doing things. Now, we're not saying that the way that we do it is the correct way, but it's the way that we do it at CSU, to ensure that we're handling horses as safely as possible. So I'm telling these people, I understand that you've done it this way for 10, 20 years. This is how we're going to do it here. And so that's always challenging. But it's really good to use their experience as well, because you can situationalize or put everything into a situation where you might use one technique or another. Yes.
Yeah. Now, how have you learned to teach those students? Because we have a lot of people coming with some teaching experience. You're always going to get that, though. And I'll tell you about an incident in a minute. But actually, I'll tell you now. I had a student that I was training for their instructor course, and so the week before I turned up to teach them, and I heard them, and I was watching just the end of their lesson, and they said to the student something like, ride the horse forward into the contact, the horse is sucking behind, he's avoiding the pressure, and I want you to ride him forward and get his nose with the contact in front of the vertical. Right? Now, she said that. I heard it to a student, really confident, knew what she was doing, good as gold. Then she was at an exam, and she said, I can't guess who I have to teach? I have to teach such and such who rode at the World Championships, right? And she said that she was absolutely petrified at the exam. And I said, have a look at the way the horse is going. Have a look think about what you told that student last week about her horse, and don't teach the person, teach the situation. Then she was fine. Once she realised that this World Championship rider had a green horse that she was riding, and she could go out and teach her. She was absolutely fine. Yeah. Anyway, so
that's exactly how I felt at the conference.
Yeah.
We just had the International Society for Equitation Science conference, and I had to give a 12-minute talk on the Australian horse industry. And when you're talking to people who have been involved in the Australian horse industry for a long time, it's definitely nerve-wracking, that's for sure. But then once you get into it and you start talking about it, or you're on your topic, you're fine. But leading up to it, I was definitely nervous.
Yeah, and you knew your subject. And I was one of the people, and I've been involved in the Australian and international horse industry my whole life. And I just thought, interesting. I thought it was an interesting talk. I certainly didn't think it was a waste of time. I think you did a great job. So, congratulations to you as well.
I'm glad, thank you.
Yeah.
You could probably tell I was nervous though.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think once you got into it, you were fine. Yeah.
Haley did give me a pretty good introduction.
Thinking about your students coming in, and those students who are coming in with the 40 years of experience, because we're talking about the topic, we're not talking about their previous experience. What's the most common fault that you see let's start off with what's the most common fault you see with the inexperienced and what's the most common fault you see with the more experienced people handling horses?
Just in terms of basic horse handling,
yes.
I find more inexperienced people are really tight on horses. I guess when you teach them how to lead, you teach them where to have their hand on the lead rope, and an inexperienced person, just as an example, will almost always go to hold the buckle of the lead rope nice and close to the horse's head. And I think that's just some sort of sense of security, and despite the fact that you tell them, it's quite dangerous to be holding the buckle of the lead rope, or the clip of the lead rope, they'll still do it, and quite constantly you'll have to be telling them to move their hand down. And then when we're talking about people who have been in the industry for years, it's the opposite. They quite often assume that the horse knows everything, and they're a bit lax in how they hold the lead rope or how they handle a horse, particularly because the horses that we use are so used to having everything done to them. I think that's just an example of...
Wait, can you hear anything? No? That's because we're waiting for someone with a good quality horse product to be advertised here. If that's you, then contact us, horsechats@horsechats.com, and we'll send you the details. Thanks. So sort of one experience to the other. Yeah. And then just generally, is there anything else you need to say about just common faults or just training that you feel you're going over and over again with either experienced or inexperienced?
Yeah, where to stand with a horse, and like using your body language as well when you're doing things. It's so common that students will stand on either side of a horse while one student's doing something, a student will do something else. And what I absolutely hate is when you see students taking a rectal temperature of a horse, and there's one person standing on the left side of the horse taking the temperature, one person standing on the right side of the horse, holding the horse, stopping it from swinging its hindquarters away from the thermometer, and then there's someone standing directly in front of the horse. And when I see that, I almost have an aneurysm, because it's just the potential that someone getting injured, if not all three of them in that situation, is so high. But where students stand and turning their backs on horses, this is experienced or inexperienced people. When you're working with a horse that you're comfortable with, we quite often might turn our backs towards them to talk to our friends, or just not be in the moment with the horse.
So it's a lesson there, everyone to be on the same side and just keep watching, keep alert.
Yeah, I'd say you treat every horse as if they're a young horse. Young horses treat us so much. We'll walk up to a horse and pat them right on the middle of their forehead, and horses that have had it done 100 times, they don't really react to it. But a foal, when you go to do that to their head, they sort of pull their head back a little bit, because you don't realise that you're entering a spot where they don't have great vision. And so foals will tell you that, and young horses, they tend to tell you that, but older horses, they're used to things happening to them like that. So I like to say, treat every horse as a young horse or a horse that you don't know. And that's sort of the safest way to do it. All horses can be dangerous, and the statistics are that 11 people get hospitalised every day due to horse-related injuries. And whilst most of them are riding injuries, there are just common day-to-day management strategies that result in injuries, handling and leading horses.
No, that's good. All right, now have you got a book that you can recommend to our listeners?
Well, not a particular book, and this is probably not really related to people who have been in the industry for a while, but I say any horse anatomy book. If you are working with students or people in the industry, people who have been working in the industry for years might not know basic skeletal and mechanical anatomy, and that really comes into play when we're talking, about riding horses and horse health. So I think the general underpinning of anatomy is actually really important, and it's something that you'll find that a lot of students or people in the industry might not have a good overall knowledge of.
I know that you said any horse anatomy book, so people can get that underpinning knowledge, but can you name one of them?
There's a horse anatomy atlas. I think it's called Veterinary Anatomy Atlas Horses. That's a really good one. It's a picture one. And that's, I guess, the way that I learn a lot of things. It breaks down every individual parts of anatomy and sort of labels them in a visual way, which is really good.
And good for people that are teaching too, to have that they can, use it to teach their students just a little bit more about anatomy. And remember, you can find all the books recommended by our guests at horsechats.com/books. You can have a look at the guest page for the individual book they recommended, or just look at the recommended books by order of popularity at horsechats.com/books. All right, now, what are you looking forward to in the moment, Jaymie? You've got your young horse that you're bringing on. What else are you doing?
Yeah, and I've just started doing sort of a more full-time teaching role here at the university.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm sort of looking forward to over the next couple of years. And we've got a few, hopefully, research projects. I'm finishing off my project on alternative supplementation in mares and the comparison between injectable and oral formulations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm very keen to get my little one going. She's going to have, I probably won't start her for a year or so yet.
Okay. All right. And we might be able to talk to you some more about your research that you've been doing in reproduction as well, Jaymie. That would be great if you could come back and do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Jaymie, in a few sentences, can you summarise your philosophy with horses into a message for our listeners?
Yeah, so I guess when you're working in the horse industry, a lot of people quite commonly say, it's who you know. And I have a different philosophy. I believe it's who knows you. And people know you for a reason, and you want that to be a good reason. So you want to be working hard to make not necessarily a name for yourself, because it's not all about everyone knowing you, but do the right things and, try and learn something every day to help you do that.
Yep. And it's a small world, isn't it? Even over the other side of the world, we had someone recently who'd been involved with someone when she was in the States, and they heard, from the US, they heard her podcast and contacted her and said, oh, that's where you are now, but it can reflect on a bad note too. You do something wrong, you do something bad, and it's going to be repeated again and again. Yeah. All right, Jaymie, how can people contact you?
They can contact me on my email, which is jloy@csu.edu.au, or they can contact me on my phone number, 0411 397 346.
Okay, and those details will be on your page, which will be horsechats.com/Jaymie Loy, or horsechats.com and search for Jaymie, and that's JAYMIE, or if you want to go Loy, because that's a bit easier to spell, just LOY. Okay, thanks, Jaymie, for talking to us today. Interesting hearing about, about just your role within the horse industry, and everyone sort of has a different role, different type of role within the horse industry, but teaching students as they're coming in and teaching that really important horse handling, something so basic that you just think, oh, yeah, I can do that. But there's so many mistakes that can be made. Yep. All right, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College. Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.